Hello everybody and welcome to another One Piece video. I'll start off by saying that this is not a One Piece chapter review, but instead is a video inspired by the latest chapter of One Piece. And this is mainly because, at this point, I feel like everybody has read the chapter unofficially, so if I'm just recapping stuff, it's boring. So instead, I've decided to use the chapter itself as a springboard to rank the Marine Admirals. And I'm going to be doing this starting from the bottom up. So in this case, it would be weakest to strongest. Now, I know what you're thinking, Sawyer. Everybody knows that Akainu is numero uno. He's number one, top dog, yada, yada, yada. There's no need to rank him. We already know who number one is. So that's absolutely correct. Yes, we already kind of know, everybody knows that Akainu would be the strongest admiral, which is why I'm not going to leave him till the end. Yes, Sakazuki is the strongest admiral. He fought Aokiji for 10 days, and he got promoted to the position of fleet admiral. Now, part of that promotion was political because some of the higher-ups were already supporting Akainu to begin with, but the reason why he was able to lock in that promotion was because of his feats. According to its favorite card, Akainu's Devil Fruit power, the Magu Magu no Mi, is said to be part of a group, very exclusive group of Devil Fruits that have the strongest attack power in the verse. By the way, because I'm so old and it's hard to keep up with everything online, I recently just learned that when people get salty in regards to Akainu during power scaling debates, some people actually resort to calling him Clifford as an insult. So during Luffy's fight with Kaido, Kaido actually mentions that Luffy's power reminds him of the things that he's seen in a comic strip. And so at one point, a fan asked Oda, what other comic strips are there in the world of One Piece? And so Oda goes on to list the comic strips or the picture books that exist in the world. One of them is obviously Sora, Warrior of the Sea, which is the Germa 66 one. There's also another one called Monkey Ball, which is the One Piece world version of Dragon Ball. But relating this back to Akainu, there's actually a comic strip in the world of One Piece called Fire Dog. So I'd be really interested to find out what the lore is behind Fire Dog's character. Anyhow, now that Akainu has been recognized and crowned as the top one, as far as admirals are concerned, we can now start ranking from the bottom up, and doing so would require us to take a look at the admirals called Green Bull and Fujitora. Now, the reason for why we have to start with them is because they have been admirals for the least amount of time, meaning that they have the least amount of experience as admirals to begin with. Not only that, but another thing that counts against them is that while they were in Marijoa during Reverie, Sabo, along with his group of revolutionary friends, were able to achieve all three of their objectives. They had three objectives. Sabo had three objectives. The first one was to destroy the symbol of the Celestial Dragons. They got that done. Number two was to free as many slaves as they could, including Kuma, and they got that done as well. And then the last goal was to be able to burn some of the food, some of the resources that were being kept in Marijoa to feed the Celestial Dragons. And so they were able to accomplish that goal as well, while Green Bull and Fujitora were there. In fact, according to Jabra, Fujitora was actually helping the Revolutionary Army free slaves. So it was a total mess, and I know the main argument in favor of the admirals here is that they couldn't really use their powers all that much because they were fighting in the Holy Land. In fact, there's actually a shot of a Celestial Dragon telling Green Bull that if he hurts one of the Celestial Dragons, he's going to be put to death. And so that obviously created a pretty legitimate restriction on their powers. However, I cannot help to think that if the places were swapped, if it had been Aokiji and Kizaru at the Reverie, I'm pretty sure that the revolutionaries would not have left Marijoa as clean as they did. So let's give Kizaru and Aokiji the same handicap that was given to Green Bull and Fujitora. Let's say they were told, hey, you got to do something about the revolutionaries, but if a Celestial Dragon gets hurt, we're going to take your head. The thing about Kuzan and Borsalino is that they've been shown to be very precise when they need to be. In chapter 1081, Aokiji freezes several members of Blackbeard's crew because they were going to start something with him, and even though he freezes BB's crew, it's important to note that he does not freeze the entire bar that he's in, and he also does not freeze the townspeople that are nearby either. Another example from the same chapter, he targets Hibari and freezes her, but he does not freeze Kobe, even though Kobe and Hibari were standing very close to each other. Now when it comes to Kizaru, we saw some of his position back in Marineford. We've seen that he's able to point his finger at people and just snipe them from a distance. But beyond that, one of the most important feats that he has that showcase how precise he can be is him being able to snipe the key in half that Luffy was going to use to free Ace from the cuffs. So had Kuzan and Borsalino been at the Reverie, pretty sure they would have been able to couple their battle IQ with their position to be able to harm and target the revolutionaries that they wanted to target, while at the same time not harming any of the Celestial Dragons. Also, thanks to Marineford, we know that the original three admirals can use advanced armament hockey, so that's something that's been confirmed for them, but it's not something that has been confirmed for either Green Bull or Fujitora. There's also some scenes in Marineford that sort of hint at Aokiji and Kizaru Kizaru being able to use Future Sight. And while yes, those are just kind of hints, it hasn't been confirmed that they can use that. In terms of observation Haki, Future Sight would be at another level than anything we've seen from either Fuji or Green Bull. Alright, now with that out of the way, we can now get into, out of the two newest admirals, Fujitora versus Green Bull, which one would we place above the other? Okay, so if we take a look at their observation Haki feats, they are very difficult to measure against each other. Because on one hand, we have Green Bull, showcasing the ability to detect Shanks and his crew from miles and miles away outside of Wano. And then on the other hand, we have Fujitora, who can actually see people as silhouettes even though he's blind, and also sense their intent. And this was exemplified by him being able to sense that the citizens of Dressrosa were secretly acting in support of Luffy. And so even though these feats fall under the observation Haki umbrella, we can't really compare them or measure them against each other because what's being highlighted is a different application. So in Green Bull's case, what's being highlighted is the range of his observation Haki, whereas in Fujitora's case, what's being highlighted is his ability to overcome physical sight barriers, as well as his ability to sense people's feelings. So it would be very difficult to make a proper assessment and have a conclusion about whose observation Haki is stronger. But because of Fujitora being blind, maybe we can get away with saying that Fujitora's observation Haki is more versatile. I've heard people say in real life that when somebody loses one of their senses, that the other four try to compensate for the loss of that sense, and so the other senses start working overtime. And I think we can make that argument for Fujitora, that maybe that's kind of what happened with his observation Haki, because he blinded himself. That being said, we can for sure say that Green Bull's armament Haki is definitely stronger than Fujitora's. And we know this because not only was Green Bull able to tank a Haki-embedded Kanabo attack from Yamato, who by the way is a character that typically is placed comfortably amongst most members of the community at the first Yonko Commander level, but Green Bull's roots were able to bypass the biological defenses of a Lunarian. So if we consider what we saw Green Bull did to King, and also his showing against Yamato, and we compare that to Fujitora's armament Haki showing back in Dressrosa against Doflamingo's Birdcage, Doflamingo kind of placing around 3rd Yonko Commander level plus, around that level, I think it's fairly obvious which one of the two admirals would end up coming out on top in an armament Haki clash. Fujitora's Devil Fruit power, the Zushi no Mi / Press Fruit, is a Paramecia type Devil Fruit, whereas the Morimori no Mi, which belongs to Green Bull, is a Logia Devil Fruit type. And we were recently reminded, thanks to the anime, that a Paramecia awakening causes the user's power to affect things outside of the user's body. However, when it comes to Logia Devil Fruits, Oda has made the deliberate decision of keeping those awakenings a secret. And so I think that that heavily implies that he's saving the best type of awakening for last. Also, if we exclude counting mythical Zoans, which fall under the Zoan umbrella of Devil Fruit types, Logia types are the rarest kind of Devil Fruit there is. Only 13 types of these Devil Fruits have been documented to exist in the series, and even the smartest mind in the world has admitted to them being the only kind of Devil Fruit power that he cannot replicate. So with that in mind, and given the fact that Vegapunk has also said that one of his goals is to be able to discover a never-ending supply of energy that he can share with the rest of the world, a safe bet is to conclude that Logia awakenings should be able to sustain and harness an infinite supply of elemental energy. We've already gotten a hint to this because of how Sakazuki and Kuzan's fight ended up changing the weather permanently at Punk Hazard. And now that the story has entered its final stretch, Oda has been giving us hints as to what we can expect during the final war. And one of the most recent hints we got is that the world government can make use of a power that can destabilize and reshape the entire world. And when it comes to seeing how well Paramecia powers measure up to Logia's, the only Paramecia power that Oda has actively compared to that of a Logia classification has been Whitebeard's power of the Gura Gura no Mi. Now, one of the most popular fan theories out there is that some of the people of the Ancient Kingdom originally came from outer space, and that the reason for why they ended up settling on Earth was because they were running out of resources back where they lived. Another popular fan theory is that Joy Boy, as well as some of the people of the Ancient Kingdom, possessed such an advanced degree of technology that they were the ones who created Devil Fruits in the first place. And one of the things we know that all Devil Fruits have in common is that they never die. They're simply a part of an infinite reincarnation cycle that gets passed down through time. Kind of reminds me of Whitebeard's last words in Marineford, where he says that Ace's flame will never be extinguished, because there will always be those that will inherit it. So let's think about it like this. If Joy Boy and the people of the Ancient Kingdom knew what it was like to suffer because of a lack of food and resources, then it would make perfect sense for them to create Logia Devil Fruits so that through their awakening, future generations wouldn't have to go through that same pain again. Like with Akainu's power, you could create great land masses and continents with fresh soil for people to live in case they ever needed to relocate. Aokiji's awakening would allow people to have an infinite supply of drinkable water by letting his ice melt, and given enough time, his ice could also create giant bodies of water as well. And something like Green Bull's awakening would be capable of feeding an entire planet. In fact, during his introduction, Green Bull heavily implies that his Devil Fruit power has allowed him to go 3 years without eating anything. And on a related note, given that Oda's favoritism for Luffy knows no bounds, and given that Kaido mentions that Luffy's awakening has features of both a Paramecia and a Zoan type of awakening, I've often mentioned that I believe that Luffy will show signs of a Logia type of awakening as well, and that if that's the case, then he will be able to showcase awakened features of the Mera Mera no Mi. So just like Law was shown to be able to inherit some of the features of Corazon's Devil Fruit, I think there's enough evidence in the story that points to Luffy already having inherited features of Ace's Devil Fruit as well. I think this upcoming fight against Kizaru is going to be key in pushing these Logia awakening features to the forefront of the story. Because Oda started hinting at this at the beginning of the arc when he had Lilith mention that the entirety of Egghead runs on fire, and that one of the goals for them would be able to obtain the power of an undying flame, because this way they could create their own sun. So if Luffy begins showing signs of the Mera Mera no Mi awakening in his fight against Kizaru, then that would also serve to explain why it was that Nika was known as the Sun God. So yeah, a lot of the evidence points to Logia awakenings being connected to infinities, right? Like an infinite source of an element, or a permanent, everlasting elemental change in the weather, like in Punk Hazard. And so a very normal question that would come up here would be, wait a minute, like if we're dealing with Logia awakenings, venturing into the divine and infinite, right? If we're dealing with infinities, how would Oda even write a fight for that kind of power? So I do think it's important to remember here that according to math, even though it sounds super weird and strange, there is such a thing as some infinities being bigger than other infinities. It's kind of difficult to explain, but if you started at number 1, right? Let's say you start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to infinity, that's one infinity. Now, if we were to take a different approach and say, okay, we're going to be doing that, we're going to be counting, starting from 1, we're going to be counting to infinity, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we do that, but we're also going to be counting the decimal numbers in between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5, then theoretically that would make that infinity bigger than the first one, because there are more numbers to be counted. So even if Luffy begins showing signs of the Mera Mera no Mi awakening in his powers, right? Even if that's the case, we know that Akainu has the Magu Magu no Mi. And the Magu Magu no Mi, according to Oda, is a superior version of the Mera Mera no Mi. So maybe Luffy and Sabo will have to team up together with their awakenings to try and do something about that. With that in mind, the point that I was making in regards to power scaling admirals is that for the most part, Logias are superior to Paramecias. Add that to the fact that when we usually see Fujitora use his gravity powers, he typically has to grab his katana and focus, whereas Green Bull just kind of walks around and makes things grow without even thinking. Plus, Fujitora's Devil Fruit seems to be a derivative of 2 other Devil Fruit powers that we've seen be used in the story by Shiki and Blackbeard, and both of their powers have showcased better results when compared to Fuji's, at least in regards to the range of their Devil Fruit applicability. On top of that, Green Bull has shown to be able to deal with his elemental weakness to fire, and during the reverie, Akainu told Green Bull to find Fujitora and kick him out. So the fact that Akainu believed that Green Bull would be at a level to be able to find Fujitora and kick him out of Marijoa, I think says a lot about where Aramaki is in Akainu's mind, power-wise. Add that to the fact that we know that Aramaki carries with him a katana, which we have never seen him use before, plus the fact that he was able to capture Edward Weevil, and at this point, I think the results are pretty clear here. So again, observation haki would go to Fuji, armament haki would go to Green Bull, and then the tiebreaker between them would be the Devil Fruit power. I'm trying to figure out like what would Fujitora's awakening be, because his power is about like pushing and pulling, right? That's what he does. So it might look something similar to Kid's awakening with a sign. But yeah, for right now, everything in the story points to Logia awakenings being superior to Paramecia awakenings. Because again, the only time that Oda has gone out of his way to let us know that we should consider a Paramecia at the same level as a Logia is with Whitebeard's Devil Fruit, the Guragura no Mi. By the way, this goes without saying, but my personal preference has nothing to do with the ranking or the placement of the characters. Because out of the admirals, Fuji is actually the one that I relate to the most. Because Fuji is all about exposing the truth for what it is, and then identifying things that need to be changed, and then pushing for that change. And so as a counselor, that's kind of part of my job. So he's the one that I relate to the most. So with Fuji coming in at number 5, Green Bull at number 4, and Akainu at number 1, the fight for the number 2 slot obviously comes down to Kizaru versus Kuzan. And this is actually one of the few matches that reminds me of the Shanks versus Mihawk debates because of how even it is. Because we know Aokiji trained under Garp, whereas there's also been hints about Kizaru training under Sengoku. And we know from Roger's comments that Garp and Sengoku are about even. They're interchangeable in his mind. When it comes to speed, though, I do think it's fair to say that Kizaru has not only Aokiji, but every Admiral beat in terms of speed. And just recently, we did see Garp completely blitz and bypass Aokiji. Although the context of that fight kind of does make us wonder if Aokiji was holding back or not. But regardless, speed has to go to Kizaru because of his DF. We also recently saw that hockey attack power-wise, Kuzan seems to be evenly matched with Garp. And again, that also has to have the asterisk at the bottom regarding whether or not either of them are holding back. But what really puts Aokiji up there, I think, is the fact that him and Akainu were able to fight for 10 days. No matter how you slice it, that is a crazy endurance feat that goes above anything that we've seen from Kizaru so far, endurance-wise. So we are going to need more hockey and endurance feats from Kizaru, because the chapter kind of ends with him trying to break Sentomaru's advanced armament hockey defense, which at least back in Sabaody was hyped up to be the strongest guard in the world. But then we also recently saw how awakened Rob Lucci could just Shugon/hand pistol Sentomaru with no problem. So now when it comes to their DFs competing with each other, there is a scene in Marineford where Aokiji tries to freeze Whitebeard, but it doesn't last very long because the vibrations can't be frozen. And then after that, he gets a sneak attack from Jozu, which makes him bleed out of the mouth. Which, by the way, when it comes to Kizaru, I believe that the only time we've seen him bleed before was when he was fighting Rayleigh in Sabaody. But the main question I got from that scene in Marineford was, could Aokiji's ice be able to freeze Kizaru's light if he wanted to? Can light be frozen, essentially? So I did a little digging, and it turns out that it can. But it has to be done under very specific conditions in a lab. And from what I read, the effect doesn't last very long. There's actually a scene by the end of Marineford where Law is escaping, and Kuzan uses Ice Age on the water. And then after that, Kizaru comes in with Yasakani no Magatama. And he's trying to aim at the sub, but this is what happens to Aokiji's ice as a consequence. I like how Oda made it a point to show a degree of facial concern from two Yonko against these two admirals, because this is Blackbeard's reaction to Aokiji, and then this is Luffy's reaction to Kizaru. Now, something that we need to see for sure here is a monkey light attack from Kizaru, because each of the admirals obviously have like an animal theme to them. So we've seen Aokiji use pheasant beak, we've seen Akainu use like hellhound and sort of like that hound name in his attacks. We've also seen Fujitora use a tiger attack as well. So the only two admirals that haven't shown an attack based off of their animals are Green Bull and Kizaru. Obviously Kizaru's name means yellow monkey, and now he's fighting Monkey D. Luffy, so it's going to be monkey versus monkey. Now I just want to take a moment here and give you my remarks about the chapter. I do apologize for not giving you a full review, but again, you know, I think like the chapter unofficially has been out for a while now, and to be honest, it is really hard sometimes to find the motivation to wait and do it with the official, because I feel like at that point, like most people have read it, and I cannot do a chapter review the day that the unofficial drops, because of my job. For those of you who don't know, I'm a fully licensed therapist now, and so it can get very complicated in terms of time management, because I'm not just seeing clients and that's it. I also have to document, you know, each of the sessions, and then sometimes things come up where I have to like call different people or contact different agencies or, you know, plan and all these things. So not only has the amount of time that I can dedicate to these videos gone down, but also, unless the chapter is super hyped up, there's very little incentive in waiting till Sunday, because by then the community, or at least most of the community, has had its way with the discussion of the chapter that was released several days prior. So the bottom line here is that I'm trying to make some changes so that it works out for everybody involved. And going back to the chapter, I thought it was really cool to see Kuro again under the light of the crescent moon. And speaking of crescent moons, there's a scene in the chapter where Luffy mentions that Bonnie is acting weird. So I'm wondering if Katarina Devon has already infiltrated the group and is posing as Bonnie. So it could be a way of Oda using the cover page with Kuro to warn us of Katarina's presence, because her nickname is Crescent Moon Hunter. We finally got confirmation that we're going to Elbaf soon, which is great. There was a bit of dialogue with Saturn where he says that humans can be equated to insects because they can just breed and reproduce to take each other's place. And that kind of made me think, are the Gorosei not human? Also, why is Robin so wounded? Who beat her up? What happened? Finally, reeling things back into the admirals, I really liked the sense of defiance that Kizaru shows against Saturn. So because he's light, he can just bypass the dome, just get right through the defense system. But then he says that if he does that, he'll run into Sentomaru, and Saturn just tells him, so leap over him. To which Kizaru says, well, that's not a very sporting thing to do when a man is making a principal stand like that. So he's talking back. He's talking back to one of the Gorosei. Thought that was kind of cool, because it shows that even within the order of things, Kizaru has a will of his own. So to end this with the ranking, Kizaru versus Aokiji, who comes out on top? Okay, I'll say two things. This is very hard, but if we look at what the story has told us so far, right? This is key. So far, Aokiji fighting Akainu for 10 days straight is a feat that cannot be overlooked. Like, in terms of what we know about Kizaru so far, there's nothing that measures up to that. Plus, Jinbei actually says that the two admirals, Kuzan and Sakazuki, were almost evenly matched. Were almost equal in power. So based off of the canonical information that we have so far, that number 2 slot has to go to Aokiji. So the way things are right now, the way the order would go is Fuji number 5, Green Bull number 4, Kizaru number 3, Aokiji number 2, and Red Dog number 1. That being said, we do have that scene during Wano, well, outside of Wano actually, that happens after Kaido and Big Mom declare their alliance, where Kizaru shows full intent on going to Wano to fight Tu Yonko at the same time. It's huge. That's a very big statement to make, and lets us know where Kizaru's head is at in terms of the power that he packs. Unfortunately, though, that's not really a feat because it never solidified. But what I can say is this. Because of Oda's favoritism towards Luffy, because Oda loves, and I mean loves, his main character so much, it would not surprise me. Because Oda constantly tries to make Luffy more likable, stronger, and look better in general, right? Luffy doesn't look bad in the story for very long. Because of that, it would not surprise me if Kizaru shows better feats in this fight against Luffy than Kuzan did in his fight against Garp. Because if the whole point is to make Luffy look good, then Oda has to make Kizaru look like an absolute beast so that Luffy can beat him and look even better. And so depending on what Kizaru shows here, he might end up moving up to that number 2 slot. And that is going to do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching and for all of your support. You can follow me on Instagram at Team7Mage if you wish to do so. Take care. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.